Yeah, thank you, Alex. Thank you for inviting me as well and talk about digital transformation as an introduction to this audience. I guess in terms of my introduction, as Alex said, I've been, so one thing I want to clarify, I think you might see my name as Saeed Abbas. My full name is Saeed Latif Abbas, and that's what Alex is, because I usually go by Latif, my middle name. So hence Alex gets thinking Latif. So I just want to make sure that I clarify that thing in case if anyone was confused about that. So I work for a bank. So my background is really coming from an industrial perspective. So I work in the industry for many years. Over 2 decades, I've been working for the industry. So it's a long time. And so currently I work for an organization called Goldman Sachs. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's a US bank. And I've been with them for many years, about 15 years. And my day job is engineering technology, information technology. That's what I've been doing for over 20 years. I've kind of used technology as a facilitator, or these days more of a transformation for the industry, for the businesses that I'm involved in. And so the reason why I've kind of connected with Alex is because I know very well how the technology has been shaping up and changing the business around us, mostly from an economic and finance perspective and outside of finance. But the sector as a charity or a services industries, I was very intrigued about how that can help, technology can help actually change and transform that. And in the last few years, I've been engaged in several conversations and also some of the organizations to see how I can help, knowing what I know, and be the bridge between the technology, hearsay, what people talk about, and the organization, more specifically charities, who basically have their own processes and things like that, and challenges, and how I can bridge them together. So I've consulted in few occasions in few charities in my own personal capacity, and that's the kind of a link, coming back to how I got linked with Alex on this. And I was happy to come in and talk about digital transformation as an introduction to as a subject to this audience. So kind of that's basically my background is. I normally in these conversations, I'd love to go round table and get introduction from others as well. I guess I don't know how many people are there, so that could be a little bit of challenging. But if I could invite, if possible, a couple of you to just come forward and just introduce yourself, and then about your background a little bit, so that I know exactly where you're coming from and what you're looking from this session. Unfortunately, we might not be able to go everyone, but if a few of you, please, if you can come forward, that would be great. Anyone?
I'll go. My name's Owen Donnelly. I work for, I manage a housing cooperative, North Camden Housing Cooperative, and I'm looking at basically how to digitize our processes, our paperwork. The office is full of leave-right files, so it's just about trying to get the culture as well as the systems right, and getting people used to digitization rather than just using paper.
Got it. Thank you so much, and yeah, that's very helpful. Anyone else?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi, I'm Jawad Doa. I'm currently working at ProTouch SA, which is a football charity. When it comes to digitalization, I have a particular interest. I did economics at university, and my paper was on how digitalization and AI would change the economy, and particular focus on unemployment.
Mm-hmm. That's very helpful. Well, thank you so much for doing that. Maybe one more, and then I can switch to the subject.
Hi, my name's William Britton. I'm the chair of the Highgate Society, which is a kind of operates in Highgate, and we kind of have an enormous range of activities stretching from sort of planning, amenity, group, campaigning, various kind of organising social events and so on. And my need is to kind of coordinate effectively a group of maybe 100 volunteers who do sometimes a lot of their time, sometimes very little. I mean, that's what there's so many aspects to the digital world that we need to get to grips with, but that gives us, I hope, a bit of an insight into what we do.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of insight so that I kind of get the feel of the audience as well. Unfortunately, because of time, can't go through everyone, but I think that's enough for me to basically just understand the aspiration that you're looking for. So I guess in the next 17 or 18 minutes or minutes, my agenda or my objective is to really introduce you and maybe demystify a digital transformation, because sometimes there's a lot of hype there as well, and there's a lot out there. People often tell me that they don't know where to start from. What is the problem that they need to solve? And sometimes it just lingo out there is so much. There's so many things, and people don't know what is it that we're really talking about. So for the next 60 or 70 or odd minutes, I'm going to basically talk about starting from very basic and then building towards what, why, and how in a really introductory manner. So it's not going to be very deep or technical, but we'll talk about basic principles as well. So I'm going to try to switch to my screen, and which means that my video will turn off, because that's the challenge I was facing earlier on. So apologies if you are not able to see me. But hopefully you'll be able to see my screen. Are you able to see the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Well, okay, so let's start with the topic. So digital transformation introduction. So the agenda, as I said, it's really an introduction, and then using that introductory theme to introduce you about the methodology and framework that involves in the typical transformation related to digital or information technology. I'm going to briefly touch upon a topic called Agile, which is basically one of the core principles related to when it comes to digital transformation. And Agile is a process which is not necessarily, these days, it's not necessarily just about information technology or digitalization. It's actually now the principle being used outside of that as well, in terms of process, in terms of doing things. So that's quite an interesting one. Hopefully most of you have heard about it. If not, then this is an opportunity to basically just give you an overall introduction to that. I'm going to briefly touch on cloud. What does it mean? And we hear quite a lot. These days, you pretty much use this technology quite a lot using your phone. But I'm going to touch upon a little bit on different flavor of cloud services and how it enables the whole digital transformation. And hopefully throughout the whole presentation or the session, we'll have few case studies, stories of transformation to share, just so that people can relate how in different areas and different problem set, how digital transformation has actually helped. So that's my aim. So let's see how it goes. So what is digital transformation? I'm going to start really basic, and I'm going to take you back to the definition. There are a few words on the slide, but we'll decipher it one at a time. So the whole thing consists of two things: digital and transformation. So what is digital? Digital, really, in a simple and in the form of dictionary word, it basically describes an electronic technology that generates, stores, and processes data. So the literal definition is system of receiving and sending information as a series of numbers, 1 and 0. So digital, when you talk about digital, everything is represented in a binary, which is 0 and 1. And that's the level that low-level information is maintained. So that's literally the definition coming out of dictionary. But the really one level higher definition, it describes the electronic technology that generates, stores, and processes data. Digital technologies are electronic tools, systems, devices, and resources that generate, store, process data. Again, it's continuously talking about same thing, which is data, information, tools, systems. So that's the reason why I put these definition is that when we talk about digital, it's all about information, data, information, data. And then the definition of transformation. It's a complete change in someone or something. The way in which we work has undergone a complete transformation in the past decade. So it's about change. So on one hand, the definition says digital mean information using some tools and systems represented digitally. And then transformation, which is a change. So you're basically talking about information and a change, if you go really basic and literal. So that's what the definition says. So let's see what other people actually describe it. And the definition could vary, but I wanted to really go into the core aspect of the definition. So here is another flavor of how digital is described by Tom, who's basically works for GDS. So applying the culture, practices, processes, and technologies of the internet era to respond to people's raised expectation. Now that you take that basic definition and you make it more relatable or to normal life. So it's basically talk about applying the culture. Now we have another word as well, culture, practices, processes, and technology. We talked about it, but under the context of technology. And another thing I think Tom does, it basically talks about internet era, because in internet, everything is connected now to respond to people raise expectations. It talks about people. So now we have information, technology, culture, processes, and people. So they're all connected together. So then if I were to summarize this in a different way, so the reason why I put there is because these are the kind of definitions that you would see when you start picking up resources or talk to people or look at other or search in internet or books. So I wanted to connect everything. So let's go one by one some of these. So the GDS described the realignment of a new investment in technology and a business model to more effectively engage digital customers at every touch point in the customer experience lifecycle. Now, this definition specifically, I mean, not everyone can relate to this definition. Maybe some can, but if you look at that, there's more talk about it talks about customer here. So that means there's basically an entity that's at outside where you need to be a relationship between a provider and a consumer, and how technology plays a role in that business model. Now, take another example of it, rethinking how your organization uses technology to improve the way people and processes work together. Integrating digital across the organization to deliver vision, create value to improve user, client services, and develop a competitive advantage. So this definition talks about, I think, a new word that we're now hearing throughout these 3-4 slides. It's integration. So that's another interesting word. And the last one says that changing businesses, operational processes to getting things done in agile and intelligent, usually powered by data and automation. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think about digital transformation and not forgetting about my background, I find these very interesting because depending on which definition you take, your perspective of digital transformation may come out completely different. For example, the last one, it says about business process, operational processes, and getting things done, which none of the previous definition talks about, in an agile and intelligent way, powered by data and automation. So really, digital transformation really means it is subjective to the problem or to the organization that basically looking to adopt digital transformation or trying to solve a problem or achieve a goal. But what I wanted to do is throw these definitions, starting from the very basic definition, but throw these things so that I can actually tell you that it means different thing to different people. It really depends on the context. Now I'm going to try this particular link. If you have seen it, it's fine. It may be a couple of minutes of your rewatch this one. I'm going to try to click and see if you would still able to see it. Okay. Are you able to see my window still?
when I realized that I didn't have the resources to retire or to live.
Can you see this?
Yes.
Right.
Digital disruption. I think of it as the impact of SMAC it. Social, mobile, analytics, cloud, Internet of Things. And a whole set of technologies that have followed that, including cognitive computing and biometrics. It is, like it sounds, alarming, powerful, disruptive. And we understand now that basically it's going to change your entire competitive landscape, and it's going to change it in at least one of two ways. Either it will disrupt your customer relationships and new companies will come in and provide much better customer engagement, customer experience than you are with your products. And or it's going to change the value proposition of your product, because your product can be wrapped in products and in information and services in ways it never could be before. Those are the two challenges. What do you do to address that? In a word, integration. Take everything your business does and deliver it as a whole, and you will have a much more viable product, and you will have a much richer customer experience. But it's a hard place to get to. So let me propose 5 things for you as you go on this journey. Number 1, don't hire a chief digital officer. And I don't mean forever, but I do mean don't rush out and hire one today. Because the first thing people need to understand in your company is that digital is everybody's job, not the job of the chief digital officer. Once everybody embraces this, then you'll find you need somebody in charge of coordinating all the activities. That's when you hire your CDO. 2, organizational surgery is now mandatory. This is because we can't just fix little things that are wrong. We have to completely rethink how we do business. This will mean more empowered people. It will mean much more synchronization of the organization's activities. No more silos. 3, value chains are becoming irrelevant. So stop worrying about starting and ending points. Think of the confluence of things that you need to do, and then think in terms of synchronizing those activities. 4, get a digitized platform where people are not adding value. They are probably adding non-value added complexity. Address that by wiring in the end-to-end processes that simply don't need to be handled by humans. 5th, focus on solutions, not products. This will mean identifying problems that your customers don't even know they have. If you start to address those 5 things, I not only think you can succeed in the digital economy, I think you can have a great deal of fun. And I think that's what we're going to find in the midst of all this digital disruption.
Okay, switching back. So I do recognize that this whole video was more tailored towards the digital economy and talking about the business aspect of it, where this audience is not necessarily coming from that angle. But what I wanted to basically share with you, I mean, I wanted you to go through and then listen a couple of minutes of this, because it talks about a few things, which is very important, irrespective of the sector that it applies, because the basic principle are the same. So she talks about the integration. She talks about value proposition. So value proposition, irrespective of which sector you come from, even if it's in the voluntary or charity sector, there is a concept of value proposition. So thinking about those, thinking about the integration, thinking about the synchronization, use the word about not worrying about start and end, but rather what is in between, which is basically talk about processes, thinking about end to end. Those are the concepts that we can still learn. And the reason why I share this is precisely for that reason. It's not necessarily thinking about, and often when I discuss a lot of people who are not necessarily from the industry, think about, oh, this cannot be applicable to my sector or my organization because it's too business focused. But if we take the business aspect away from the entire 3-minute conversation, but focus on the core principles, which I just briefly laid out, I think then it gives us an insight what is it that we basically can do in terms of how can we apply that into our own organization. So now that we went through, so I'm going to, before I jump into the next slide, so we talked about the basic definition. I've shared about a couple of variation of different things that you hear or read, may have read or heard about it, and then more professional definition of how people think about digital transformation. The way I see it, the way it all comes down to me, and this is my perspective, it boils down to 3 simple words: information, process, technology. To me, the way, after reading all of this and after applying it, always, the common link in all of this is nothing to do with any sector or organization. To me, it always have come down to in 3 aspects: the information, process, and technology. And if you go back to the definition, it kept talking about information, data, processes, people, and other things, and technology, tools. So that's basically the enabler. And then you need to think about your target, which is the objective that you're trying to achieve. 3 things, which is information, process, and technology, and you focus on your target and objective goal. And that's the journey that you have to take. And that's basically is your transformation journey. And now, I do recognize it is a very high level and simple, but sometimes often taking a step back and looking at things in a very simplistic way help us focus on what we need to focus on. So hopefully that's basically where I'm coming from. So let me just give you some examples that are out there, and I'm using some commercial examples deliberately to help enable your to have the dialogue. Basically, hopefully we can have this session more bilateral. So I put 2 out there. There are several in there, but I put deliberately these 2, and Deliveroo and Amazon, not necessarily Amazon Prime, but Amazon as well, which I call them an enabler. And so I really like to now invite you is to think about, or actually share some example. Why do you think that Deliveroo is an enabler in a digital transformation? If anyone can share anything, that would be great. Your own personal perspective. Okay. If not, then I'm going to try to give you why I think that there's an enabler. So, okay, Deliveroo, yes, it's basically an idea, came in as a business concept because they looked at the delivery as a sector and say, okay, we want to change it and provided a service to the service industry. Now, during COVID, what Deliveroo has done, which I don't think even myself or others have actually anticipated they would do, not necessarily doing a delivery to mostly on a service perspective, your restaurants and your food, but they actually went beyond that. And how they've done that, they enable some small businesses to think about how they can transform. And let me share a story with you. When COVID happened, when it started off, let me see, it seemed distant away, but it was not long ago, towards the beginning of 2020, I believe. And then, so I was seeing a friend of mine who basically runs a franchise, which is a basic spa store. And I had a chance to, I spoke to him actually on the phone because we couldn't see each other. And I asked him how the business is doing. It's just basically after 6 months or 3 months of, I don't recall, the 3 to 4 months in between the COVID situation. And he basically said that there are a lot of people coming in, they're queuing up because we have to maintain the safe distance, and it takes a long time to have customers to come in and do that. And I said to him, well, how do you think you're going to continue to respond in this current situation in terms of your business perspective? And he basically said it's quite challenging because I have to keep it open and I have to think about staff and all kind of other challenges that he was talking about. So I said, have you thought about some other ways? And this is really a small business owner. And he said, well, I can't go online because I run just a store. And then I'm not like Tesco's or Sainsbury's or big these companies where basically their information, their inventory is all available and they have all the IT infrastructure. I have nothing. And then fast forward, I spoke to him after a year and a half, and I said, okay, what are you doing? I mean, back then I did tell him that, okay, you could try WhatsApp group and everything else, but it wasn't really that efficient. And then he basically said to me, oh, you know what? I've actually taken my entire thing on delivery. And I said, how do you do that? I mean, you're not delivering food and things like that. You have to know, the customers need to know the inventory, what's available and when it's available, and they place an order and you have to put that and you have to deliver it. And I said, yeah, no, it's pretty easy, because what Deliveroo has done, I can integrate, in other words, integrate my information, the information that I have, the data I have, with their platform. I can easily upload that information to them, and every day, start of the day, I provide what my inventory is, and then it becomes my customers are able to access it, and they put the order, and order comes through us, and then we pack it, we prepare it, and then we deliver it through Deliveroo. So now I think that when I say enabler and transformation, not themselves as a business, but for others, and that's as a platform, which I thought about that idea 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but I was surprised how quickly it was realized by Deliveroo to expand their market, basically, and transform their business model. And a similar way Amazon has done, like you think about this as a book selling company, change their business model and continue to think about and even more that. So those are just a commercial example that I wanted to share with you, is that you have to continue to think about your own organization and say how you can change it, and people that interact or transact with your organization. And that's just a commercial way. Now taking it more probably closer in terms of non-commercial organization, some of the charity organization we talk about over here that I've managed to find how they've actually used technology to change or apply into their own way. So WizKids is, if you haven't heard about them, they're basically an organization who basically look at the accessibility issues. And what they have done is basically they integrated with Transport of London's API to do the route planner for people who are in a wheelchair and things like that, but voice-enabled platform. Do someone do that? I mean, basically through voice-enabled platform, they are basically integrated that and integrated to their, which is pretty cool, I thought. And then same goes with another example, British Heart Foundation. I mean, became the first UK charity to integrate with Amazon Alexa to collect donations. So again, thinking about reinventing of how we interact with our stakeholders, if I can use that word. In this case, more people who are using, people who are basically a target audience for which the organization exists for, or people, the donors in this case, where British Heart Foundation able to collect more. So these are a couple of examples about that. Now, what I would like you to take is a couple of minutes, and within your organization, think about a scenario within your organization where you're able to map, and it could be one example, it could be many, into these three facets or dimensions that we talked about earlier on: information, process, and technology and tools. So just reflect a couple of minutes and see if you can find something in your organization where you can take it and say, okay, this goes into this bucket, and this goes into that bucket. And then and then you have some tool or technology available where you're utilizing to use that in your current current time. Just take a couple of minutes and think about it in your own, and you can just put there in your notepad or in your mind.
Atif, would that be something like, I don't know, managing volunteers signing up for events or something like that, or getting new members? Yeah.
That's actually that is very, very relevant. Yeah, that's that. So again, I would really like in that example to break it down. What's the information? What's the process? And what's the tool and technology to enable that? So in this case, information is about volunteers signing up. It's the sign up information that I need. If I use that Alex's example, which is a very good one. And the process is about, okay, how do I reach out to them? How do I make it easy for them to sign up? So what sort of channels that I need to go? So there's a process involved, right? And that process may be, okay, physically right now we have to go and reach out, send them emails, give them calls, or whatever connections that you have. So that's and getting the acknowledgement that you're able to sign on, or so that's the process. Then the tool and technology, that how do you use, what tools and technology you are using right now, or you would use to connect those together, two things together. So in this case, okay, fine, I'm getting information that who signed up. I have an Excel spreadsheet where I'm logging in all that information, that who's coming in, who's not, who's declined, how many invites that I've sent it across, who basically signed up on this. So that could be one example of mapping that into these three buckets. So no, thanks, Alex, that as an example of that. Yeah. So and again, if there is any, I'm not keeping an eye on the chat box. So if there are, Alex, if there are any questions there and come up something, please interrupt me, and I'm happy to take that as well.
Sure. There's a couple of points in the chat. So information, player sign up information, and process signing up, technology, CRM.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's very good. Yeah. So that's someone talking about, okay, they're reaching out to players, they need to connect, but that's information, that's the data. And the process is about sign up, which we just talked about. And CRM is a tool, basically, which is customer relation management, to basically manage your information and process together. So that's very helpful. Well, thank you. Whoever was that, thank you very much for sharing that. So again, I think I would like you to keep this information process and technology in your mind as we go through the rest of the presentation. Okay, so moving on to quickly on why. So coming back, again, I'm not taking convincing cases from a business perspective, but rather thinking about the charity industry. Right, there are 51%, looking through the charity digital skill report, as of last year, I believe this was, 51% of UK charities did not have digital strategy in place. And they see the obstacle of digital transformation for being lack of funding and lack of digital skills. And that's quite a valid, I would say, concern. And you can, I'm challenged, basically. 92% of charities which do have a digital strategy think it make a measurable difference within the year. So again, you're thinking about there are challenges associated. The large number of charities are not, they don't have a digital strategy in place. But equally, when you ask the question about whether it would be instrumental and will make a difference, and then everybody's 92% charity seems to agree with that. 83% started offering online services. This is within the last year or so, which is great to see, and I guess that's probably accelerated during COVID. Over 2/3 of charities now see digital as a prime concern of their organization, with similar numbers planning investment in digital infrastructure. So again, you start to think why, as an organization, you need to think about what is it that I need to do differently, what I'm doing now, and then how digitalization can help achieve that. So let's take one success story. I thought it would be good to share with you. And again, apologies, there may be some other good ones out there, but given that I'm an outsider of the industry, but it's quite fascinating for me when I find some examples. So I wanted to share one of these, and you may have seen this, which is related to kidney research. And if you read through this, we can collectively read that in your own time, but the summary here is that pre-COVID, again, there's a similar theme over here. Pre-COVID, this particular organization, Kidney Research, already were thinking about how to manage the data and share and collaborate on the data effectively within their own working places. And they already had a plan pre-2020, or if you like, or 2019, but maybe that plan was going to slow for various reasons. But that plan got accelerated when COVID happened. And then they had to basically, this is one example that I wanted to share, is that how you can react to it. Digital transformation is not about doing things digitally, and you do that, but it's also about how you do it. And this is a good example where you're basically thinking about they're moving their files. They used to use SharePoint, but they want to move SharePoint to Office 365. And doing that transformation probably wasn't easy and messy. But then what they have done is basically they thought through, defined the objective, and then had a plan to move towards it. And then they had a really focused steps. And then they had to do that because they had no choice during COVID, if they had to function or continue to function in the same way they were functioning. So that really means how you approach it. The digital transformation is all about how you approach the problem. And this is why I like this example, that even though there was a plan, even though there were things about how we do it, they have the right people in place, but it may not going as fast as it may required. But when an opportunity came, how quickly these people have actually accelerated that. And these are simple examples, just moving your SharePoint files into Office 365. So that's just one example, and I'm sure you've heard about similar or have experienced in your own organization something similar. And then again, these are some examples on the Catalyst website as well, which are some good ones. And I would recommend you go, and if you have time, please read through these. Particularly, I wrote through the middle one, which is the AVA one, which is pretty fascinating. This is the organization, a charity, which talks about deal about like the people who've been abused, or violence against violence. And then COVID, we've heard about so much that again was a bit, and that particular, I mean, reaching out to the people during COVID was not necessarily easy for this organization. And I think the way they addressed is basically adopting technology and see how they can do that. And it's a quite fascinating story, and I'm just going to make it very brief here. So actually, they reached out to Tech for Good, which basically an organization which helps with the funding and everything else, and they basically got some support, and not only from a funding perspective, but also from a skills-based as well. And they came up with an app, some tools and apps to reach out to the people who they can help, and how they basically did that particular app and technology are able to connect with them and throughout the COVID. And again, I think the world has changed in terms of how we transact with people. So that's another way of thinking about how quickly we can adapt it. And again, the other fascinating thing about this is that we might think, and that may be a classic view, that anything related to technology, any project related to technology is going to take a long time. But I think the last, if anything else, in the last 2 years, we've definitely seen that it does not take that long if we really think about what we want to do and how we want to do it. So then you can achieve pretty quickly on things. And then the key thing is you iterate. You basically try to find, to make small wins, basically. So again, I would recommend highly to go through and read through some of these, because it sometimes can be an eye-opener. So we'll take, how are we doing time? So yeah, I think we maybe halfway through or just over. So maybe let's take a couple of minutes of break. So let's say maybe 5 minutes, is that okay? And then stretch your legs and do that. And then we can just come back maybe in 5 minutes and then continue again. And then I think the rest of the presentation we're talking about, so far we talked about what, why, and then I'm going to briefly introduce you how you would go about doing a digital transformation. So I hope, I hope people are back. Just some gestures in terms of voice or chat, just so that I know people are back, so that we can resume. If someone can say, all right, okay, cool. So, and thanks for turning your video on, just so that I will know there are people out still there. It's a bit weird when you can't see people. So so thanks for your video. Okay, brilliant. So I guess I'm guessing everyone is back, hopefully, and then we could just resume where we left. So I'm gonna again switch to my sharing. Unfortunately, my video is gonna disappear. So all right. Okay, so you should be able to see my slides now. Excellent. So assuming you are able to see my slides, so I'm going to start. So Alex, just thinking about from time, I just want to, I'm really bad keeping time. So how much time do I have now?
We've got until 3 o'clock, Atif. So yeah, there should be enough time for people if they want to ask questions as well.
Okay, so we have 3 o'clock for me to present, and then after that, a Q&A. Is that?
Sorry, not 3 o'clock. Sorry, I mean 4 o'clock.
Oh, 4 o'clock. Yeah. So that's
sorry.
what I thought. Okay, fine. I have a lot more to go.
Yeah,
right.
sorry. 4 o'clock. Another hour.
All right, brilliant. So I think the way we would do is that probably next 30 minutes, I do want to have that dialogue as well, is go through some of the materials that I have, and then we can have question and answers if people want. Maybe we'll do it that way. I do have an exercise prepared, or at least not prepared, rather an exercise which we can collectively work, and so maybe we'll see how that goes. All right, okay, so I'm going back to, so now question about this DX, which is the digital transformation. How do we go about? So before we even talk about how we do this, I think let's first demystify again what it is and what we shouldn't do, and what it's not and it is. I thought it would be important. So it's not about, these are the ground rules, if you like. It's not about building something new and shiny. Often that gets misunderstood. That okay, we need to revamp, we need to change everything, we need to change our model. It's not about that. It's not about starting building a solution before understanding the problem. No, it's not. It won't work, because that's not what digital transformation is about. It's really about understanding what we're trying to focus on and why. It is not about necessarily expensive. It's not about doing something very big and expensive. No, it's not about big and scary. As I said, it's not. It doesn't need to be scary. It doesn't need to be difficult. It is, however, it is understanding the real drivers and behaviors. It is all about that. It's reuse, leverage what is already out there, especially in the charity sector, because building something new could take long, and at the time of resources and skills that are required, and may not necessarily be quite right for your industry sector. And continual learning and improving. I mean, it's all about that. It's all about iterative. I mean, that's where the main, I would say, people who are able to transform or any kind of transformation, especially digital, with their organization, it is because they are able to iterate. It is an iterative process. Inclusive and collaborative. And so those are the key words that you will continue to hear about that. And then embedding across the organization. So apologies for the typo there. But it's all about, again, we go back to the thing that in definition we talked about, right? We need to be collaborative. It's about end to end. So it needs to be embedded within the organization from start to end. It's not just about the start. It's not just about the end. It's the process in between. So that's basically the initial ground rules. And then if you take a step into it, there are really 3 domains of digital transformation. So we talked about the word of the digital emphasized quite a lot, right? It's about digital organizational culture, and I think some of you mentioned in the intro as well. Culture. How do I change the culture? It is all about culture, right? Culture is about again, it's quite a broad word, and I'm not the right person to define it, or try to explain it. But the way I see it perceived, it's your norms or practices that you have, basically. That's kind of conform the culture, right? And then when you need to change, what does it mean, right? Okay, I used to read newspapers for many years, and I still do. I like to have paper in my hand, but when I know that I need to be efficient or need to get when I'm getting on my train in the morning, for me, just switching from paper to my mobile or my iPad was a thing that, okay, because I wanted to have access to more news, and I can't carry all the newspaper that are out there, right? So again, it's just that personally, that's a mindset shift for me. So that the same mindset shift required within the organization as well about being digital. What does it really mean? And look around and see what information is out there, which is not digital, basically. So it's all about information there. And again, I'm going to continue to take you back to those three things that I mentioned at the beginning: information, process, and tools. So then digital service delivery, then that's basically this third layer of domain is, okay, once you have digital, then just your information available on a digital format, how do you deliver it to your audience? How do you connect them? How do you exchange the information between the people that are transacting with, whether the employees or people in the organization, whether they're volunteers, whether they are whoever in your organization is the person who's basically the actor who's acting on the information, or I need to do something about that information. So how do you make that deliver to them, that service? So it's all about that. And the third area is really about again, coming back to that point, tools. Like, what are the tools available? What are those tools that facilitate the other two layers, which is the culture, that's the information and everything, and then service delivery is again providing and delivering the service to them using the tools and tools, the right tools. Sometimes you can put something in together, but that may not necessarily, you may call it digital because it's available in computer, but it might not necessarily giving you that. It may not necessarily be transformational, if you understand what I mean. But transformationally, it should really be helping improve your current process, very least, and that should result into value added into your organization, and whatever that value is. And the tools are, what are the right tools that are available? And again, with tools, we need to think about how to acquire those tools. I mean, what sort of costs associated with those tools? So that's basically, these are the three domains of digital transformations. It's about organization culture, or about digital service delivery. What is it that we are trying to deliver to who, whether inside, inward or outward, within the organization and outside of the organization? And what are the means of doing that? What technology are we actually using to do that? So when I bring this all together, digital transformation is all about people, process, technology. It would not work. It is nothing without people. It would not work if you don't have a process and technology. So it's a combination of all of these three things, basically. And everything else revolve around that. So it's about, again, the terminology. Some of the literature more talks about the customer, but you can replace customer with whatever user, if you want to basically talk about whoever the person you're aiming to provide service to. It's about the business model. In this case, again, business model is the model of the value proposition, if you like, about your organization. Agility, which talks about the needs in capturing your audience attention and how quickly are you able to do that. And then it's about data-driven. How much data? I mean, do you have capability? I mean, data now is everyone understands what data is. We live in the world of data. Everything that you do is available in shape of. It's an information that's available in form of data, which everyone accesses. So there's a lot of data. Each one of us. There are some stats which I don't remember right now, but it's a shocking stats that how much each one of us actually produce. We are the producers of the data. in our day-to-day life, right? When we use our phone, when we access any website, when we check our emails, when we commute, it's all data. Behind the scene, there's data is actually being produced. So again, thinking about in our organization, do we think of that? The information that's flowing, the flow of information in our organization, is it represented in the data? Do we even consider this as it's okay, this is a data that's worth capturing? Digital value, it's adapt to your needs and capture. Again, we talked about how do we basically take that digitalization and how we create the value out of it. And again, sometimes you basically need to take a reboot. Your needs and capture your audience attention. What is it that we need to do is it something that we need to change? Taking a step back. And all of this with people, which is basically using collaboration. You can, within the organization, and transformation cannot happen without the collaboration of people. It cannot, with my personal experience, and I'm sure that there are people in this audience who've a number of years and worked in different sectors, would concur with me that you need any change require collaboration from people, whether you're doing for the people or who are going to benefit. You need collaboration from them as well, and the people around you, you partner with. You need collaboration. It's very important, and it goes for all organizations, whether it's small, medium, large, regardless of that. And sometimes even one person organization need collaboration outside of that organization. So mindset, we talked about mindset, which is about thinking about problems slightly differently. And it does require a level of empathy as well. And it goes regardless of the sector. We talked about, again, business and non-business, thinking about again, I'm going to use this word quite broad, which is stakeholders, because it captures whoever needs to be encapsulated within your organization and the people, stakeholder form, whether it's your people you're providing service to, or your volunteers, or your employee, or your partners. And it's a bit about, again, looking at needs and capture your new talents, like what sort of new skills out there to do that. So it's a combination of all of these things that enables the digital transformation. So when any organization which is actually thinking about digital transformation, they should and they must ask that question within this paradigm, that are we thinking about each of those things or not? It is not about one thing. You cannot just take a data, and you could be an organization which have a lot of data and you thought about data quite well and you have all the information available. If you're not able to use it, if you're not able to add value to it, that's not digital transformation. That's just an asset sitting over there, but you're not able to use it in a valuable way. You may have a very good business model, but if that business model is not helping achieve the objectives, that's not transformation you're thinking about. You may have a great amount of agility in your organization, i.e. you're able to respond to needs and everything else pretty quickly. But if you're not thinking about other way, like thinking about your business model or your data or your processes, again, you're not going to see the results that you want to. So again, often people make mistakes. Is about, okay, throwing technology at something and then it will just happen. That doesn't work. It will not work. It will actually make things worse. And I have seen, I'll share another story. There was one few years ago, again, in my own personal capacity, I had an opportunity to connect with one of the charity which basically helps disabled children, and outside of disabled children, young children and young adults rather, training. And it's more about skill-based training. And so I got connected with them, and then they invited me to come in and just listen. So I went in, and sometimes quite fascinating to listen to people and what they're doing. And again, just how much, I was quite inspired what they were doing anyway. So they shared with me their challenges, because they've had it's a charity, reasonable sized charity, and they basically a charitable organization with very ambitious goals and objectives. And they had tools. I mean, they have tools from their CRM. They're doing everything. And this, like, they were thinking about using tools, which is awesome, which is great. But when the person was heading over, they start talking about it, he said that they are disjointed. I mean, things are working in their own silos, and it created more problem for that person who's the head of that the organization, is because I can't see the consolidated. I don't know where the problems are. Actually, I do know where the problems are. I don't know how to solve, but the problems that I know are the only problem that exist, or there are more. And then, so they cannot, he was not able to really visualize it and take his charity, take his organization to the next level. So that was quite an interesting for me to see as an example, that you can throw all the tools in the right places and you're right, but if they are in silos, you're not talking about digital transformation. It may be a transformation of one particular department or division, but not necessarily as an organization as a whole, because you're not able to achieve the value or the value proposition that you have at the organization level. So
Chooks has got their hand up. Chooks, do you want to shout out your question? Do you have a question? On mute or? No, okay, move on, Atif.
No worries, okay. So just wrapping up the conversation, I thought that was very important to bring this all, because it's often in my conversation, a lot of people, it tends to be one-dimensional, but rather the holistic of all of things, especially those of you who are thinking about more on an organization strategy level. So, okay, once we think about, if I have to think about the strategy, I have to think about all of these dimensions or some shape or form. So how do I take the next step? What is the next steps that that I should be taking and thinking about it? Now, I think it's come into the, I mean, this is, I picked this from one of the leadership network, because it's, again, taking how do I take like a thought leadership in my organization to that. And I thought that this particular picture summarizes quite well. So it's about taking small steps, but taking right steps. So it's not about just going in, putting, I mean, strategy is not what you write down. It is actually what you do and deliver. So the next step is about taking the action and deliver. So it's about groundbreaking. So you basically figure out, okay, what is it that, how do I start? What do I need to do that? So you basically really need to research, look around and say, okay, what is the first step that I need to do? You really need to collect data. When we talk about research, it's going to be synonymously going to use about data. You identify issues and problems. You're basically looking at, you're trying to define my problem set. So you have to look at what we call groundbreaking. Then you break into the next, once you kind of defined it, you basically say, okay, I kind of now know where things are within my organization or a specific problem that you're trying to solve. Then you start thinking about the next step, which is basically about experimenting. And that's where basically it's about learning and thinking about, okay, what is it that basically, how do I, now I know the problem set, and you want to know a little bit more about that problem set, okay, how the similar type of problems being solved. So you start to take experiments. And once you take the experiment to the next level, that experimenting is really an initial feedback. You need immediate feedback to see whether you're in the right track or not. And once you've actually done, so it doesn't mean that you go through the entire organization. So again, taking back, you have the strategy, and you say, I have a plan, now go and do it, like full scale, and come back to me after, I don't know, a year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, how you've actually transformed. That's not going to be the right approach. It's more about, so I think as a leader or as an organization, you kind of take the step and you basically say, okay, I picked the idea, what is the basically, should I test it? And then you pilot it. Once you've got some experiment working and you basically start to pilot it, it's a slightly bigger scale, but not necessarily full scale. And you could argue you're doing it in a silo, but your objective is not to stay in the silo. And then once that has worked, there's enough feedback that you've seen, you have a business case available. It's literally like business case, but experiment within experiment model. And then you start to scale. And that could be in a typical that way I have seen it, or I have actually adopted in my professional experiences, that you start something small. You do it within the organization or within a smaller area of organization. You experiment it, you pilot it, you generate enough interest across the organization. Of course, keeping your stakeholder informed in some shape or form. And then you start to scale because you're able to, people can relate, oh, that seems to happen. So you need to have that model. You have to think about your scaling strategy as well. So that's kind of in a very abstract way these are the phases or steps that one should take when thinking about transformation. So one of the key things I'm going to now talk about, so that's more about at a high level, the approaches. You talk about the methodology, which is about process people, and what are the practical steps that one can take. So I'm going to now dwell about few elements which are very important and fundamental to why in some organization, in some stories, the transformation is more successful. And it relates to the culture and the mindset. Is about Agile. So what is Agile? So Agile basically is it's a process methodology which came about in early, I would say 2001, around 2000, 2001. It may have existed even before that. More formally, it came into more particularly in the software development industry. Software development is all about people. They're not machines building things. It's actually people building machines. And when I talk about machine intelligent programs, right? And so they came up with the process. And obviously, being involved in that for 20 years, I know I can relate some. I've gone through those challenges and interesting things, and learned and grown up in that industry. So the process was simple. I think it created about 4 elements, basically. People. Within the software industry, about people who are actually developing it, people for the people, the product that being developed, and the purpose, like why are we doing something? That's very important. And then the aspect is collaboration. Like if you have a bunch of programmers sitting there trying to build software, a very complicated software, they have to collaborate. And there is probably a common misconceptions that programmers, like the nerdy people, they don't have a very sociable skill. There may be perceptions out there, and they just stick to their machine computers and their laptops, and then just code. It's very collaborative within their own organization. It's very collaborative, and then again, sense of response. So the software people basically require a classic way of doing this, and I'm taking a little bit of your time just to explain to you this, just to relate to the context. You would have a requirement for someone to basically say, okay, we want this particular product or software to be built. Then they would hand over to the software developers, which is thinking about a factory model. That's how it's actually, before Agile, the model was adopted as if like the way cars are manufactured. So you put, instead of machines, you have people developers, you give them instructions, they will code it, and you will get an outcome software. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. And then they took the requirements, they would do their work, and then after a year or 6 months or 2 years, whatever the time frame of the project, they will come up with the product and then ship the product to, or give the software to the people given the requirement to, and it would turn out to be that's not what they want. I think the key thing was that there was no feedback. The feedback cycle was missing. It was quite traditional. And that's where the collaboration, that's where the purpose, and that was the people coming to that. So that's where then some of the people over there who saw the pain point came up with the Agile Manifesto. And that same process is very central to Agile transformation as well. We can learn quite a lot. And it's not just about Agile, it's not just about the digital transformation, but it's now actually taking in, just like how other processes in the past have changed the industrialization now more people-oriented process are more suited towards agile process, agile-based process. So what is an agile process? So the agile process basically really, it boils down to 4 things: you scope, define, develop, and evaluate. And it's a cycle. It's an iterative process of all of these 4 main components: scope, define, develop, and evaluate. So on the right-hand side, you would see a little bit of visual, which basically means you evaluate your current. So what is it that you want to fix or want to do that? You evaluate your current organization, your processes, current structure of the company, whatever it may be that you're trying to solve the problem. You evaluate that. Then you basically move on to the stage what we call suggestion for improvement. So you did a little bit of research, you come up with this is how the research suggests that we can go about doing it. It doesn't necessarily come up with all the solution. That's not the idea, but you come up with some initial suggestions. Then you immediately move on to the actual development application. You basically start designing it. So you come into, you basically evaluated the current, you define the scope that identify the problem, you look at some initial research, and then you basically start thinking about design. Now, design is also about research, but now it's more narrow it down, refining your suggestion into more practical themes and ideas, basically. Thinking about who are we trying to solve this, and I'm going to take that example back to someone in the beginning has said. It's a sign-up application for players to come in. So it's the players that I'm interested in. What sort of information I need from them? What sort of medium that I need to attract with them? How easy can I make the process for them so that they basically so they feel attractive in terms of signing it up. So you kind of think about that design aspect. And you also have to think about who are your actors. I mean, are you talking about accessibilities? Are people who would have access to other people on the phone, or they're at home? Sometimes even thinking about whether they have at all access to computers or not. So you have to think about all those aspects. So being inclusive is very important when you're thinking about design. And then you take that, and you still do not necessarily go and think about and answer all the questions. You do enough to basically think about, okay, I have a sketch in my mind. Now I want to continue to validate that structure. So you move on to the application construction. Now, application construction, again, the terminology comes from software model. So it says application, but you can apply it into anything. So say, okay, what is it that I need to do to be able to make it more a reality, basically? The conception, the idea, the problem that I thought about it, the suggestion that I thought, the design aspect, and then basically applying to do that. So you're moving quickly into these phases, and your aim is to complete the cycle. And then in the final stage of your cycle is basically you evaluating, because that's the most important, one of the most important aspect of it, because you need to get the feedback. And that's where you would basically go and take a feedback of all the people involved, or either people who are going to benefit, people who are going to interact with. You require them to use it. So you need the feedback from them, or your management and going into the other people in terms of achieving the objectives and goals. And you iterate. That's what the Agile process is all about. Identifying what you need to do. You define the most little bit, not completely, but some meaningful way. Then you try to move on to develop, which is design, and I think, and you evaluate and test your. So the benefits of Agile. So there are a lot. I mean, the reason why an Agile has been very successful, and then if you look at in the modern world, as software is eating the world in terms of the economy and everything else, everywhere you go and you have software, the process also, people are attracted to see, okay, what it takes to them. You see people coming up with the new ideas pretty quickly. Why? Because they employ these principles. And I think one of the things that you probably hear quite a lot, and this is like a cliche now, fail fast. Again, that terminology came from software industry. It was basically saying, I want to try that idea with legs and see how far I can go, and I will fail and come back and improve it. So the benefits of Agile is that it creates visibility because you're now able to open it up earlier at the stages. You can time to market. You can validate that. And remember, technology, in your perspective, whatever project you're going to take it to do, or you're thinking about doing it from a digital transformation point of view, if you're completely relying on a particular type of technology, I can bet that in 4 years' time, that technology would change, and then something else will come in. Now, the time is very short in terms of the leap it takes, the technology, and in terms of what is there. So time to market is very important. You need to think of the right product, think about the right solution that you need to think about, or a problem that you're trying to solve with the right solution. And when it talks about enjoyable, fun, these are things about emotions related to people who are involved in that transformation journey. And then that's one of the, there are many important things, but that's another thing. If you go back to our previous thing, which is a people-based process, emotions, people are, when you're doing a transformation, it is an emotional journey. And that's, you may find it surprising to hear from me because we're talking about digital transformation. But as we talked about, one of the key elements is people. It's an emotion. Somewhere, somehow, this is going to give satisfaction to people. People you're trying to, within the organization or outside of your organization. Of course, it talks about higher revenue, but you can think about funding or your efficiency in terms of your improvement. So that's kind of the summarized benefit of Agile. So again, just to summarize on this one, the key element, one of the key elements of digital transformation is about your operation, your organizational agility. And also this agility is not necessarily about how people within an organization are doing things done, but also how you're thinking about the mindset as well. So I talked about the process, one aspect of digital transformation, which is the process, which is about Agile. I'm going to now take a pivot and move into technology. So we're talking about the innovation, collecting data. Then we moved on to the process, which is, okay, how do I take the data to move it into building something? So I need a process about this, which is about, okay, thinking about the Agile way of doing things. And then the third piece of puzzle in that framework is your technology. Now, there are, so within technology space, and again, this is quite a wide spectrum here, but now it is quite established practice that everyone is thinking about cloud. And I don't know everyone's background, so I'll assume they require a little bit of an introduction. I probably will spend a couple of minutes there. So cloud really it came from the really from a software industry and the ask. So the pioneer was Amazon. So Amazon is a huge company. They had a product, again, everybody knows. They used to sell books and whatnot, and they were trying to expand other services. But within their own organization, this is where the transformation, within their own organization, within themselves, they reflected on it, especially Jeff Bezos was the CEO, and it basically said that the cost of maintaining the machinery, and when I talk about machinery, not just a physical machinery, but the entire organization machinery, is so high and so inefficient that every time they need to come up with a new product, it would take not only months and months of or days or hours and hours of people's thought process and actually doing it, but also the rigidness within the organization because of the silos. So then I think he came up with very strong, he says, no, I want everyone in the organization to transact digitally. Whatever that information is, whatever you're basically trying to exchange information within the organization, it must be digital. And that was a quite harsh one, and he gave him very, very harsh, because not digital, and there's, I mean, he used the terminology to be more correct. It's what's called API, which is the application integration. Programmable interface. I won't go into that, but and I've actually simplified it digital. So data needs to be exchanged, and it needs to be exchanged in a digital form, and whatever that information would be. And then to do that, they had to transform internally that how information is stored, maintained, and they had to look at problems within the organization. So they created this infrastructure, which is a computing infrastructure to facilitate this information sharing in an easy and a scalable way. Now, it became quite powerful and solved a quite interestingly operational efficiency within the organization and agility, that they were able to come up with the new things pretty quickly. And then obviously internally they start thinking about, oh, if we can do it for ourselves, our model is available for outside as well. I mean, I'm sure these problems are not local to Amazon. There are other companies with a similar problem. Primarily the IT/software industry. That was their primary focus initially. And then the tech companies took over, and they've gone, to do some software, you have to, I mean, you needed at least few million. Again, I'm not going to go into this because I'm picking more commercial and business over there. But long story short, then anything that as an entrepreneur who's thinking about the idea, I shouldn't be worried about that. I'll pay someone to solve that problem for me, maybe a very minimal, because that produces a cheap way for me to do that rather than hiring a lot of people and maintaining my own thing. So it moved on to the service-based model. So that's where cloud basically come into that. And then everything changed, the data and everything else. So everything start to, rather than having your own infrastructure, you start to push it to cloud. So then cloud model transformed over the past, I would say around 10 years or slightly more, or maybe under. So it's not long ago. And it came up with the three main ways, basically, the service model. Application and services, which really sets the top layer of the cloud computing, really the end user, you and I. So not as in just for an individual perspective, but organization as well. A lot of organizations which are not IT/computing/software/technology, they want to achieve their own businesses, but they require the softwares, the tools, the technology to be able to do that. And traditional cycle where you have to hire your servers and everything else, whatnot, you have to maintain your data centers. Everything is now pushed into cloud. Now you can go into any of the cloud providers. And actually, you don't need to go cloud providers. You basically say, in terms of application, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Apple, IBM, whatever software that you're interested in, they offer it on a cloud, which means you don't need to worry about installation and all whatnot. You pay the license, you pay a fee, you pay based on your usage, and you have your tool. You take one further step. You can use one tool, you can use multiple tools, you can integrate those tools together, and the integration, the word integration is important here, becomes easier. Dare I say easier, because it depends. But that's the aim, right? So from our perspective, that's where we are transact with cloud, which is application and services. The level below, again, these are technical, so I might not go into the detail, but that's basically where the rest of the industry, which is providing that application, is actually using that. So the other service layer is for the people who are building those tools, which that basically about the development platform. And then it goes lower layer, which is basically your actual bare metal physical network and everything else. So that's how cloud computing is all about, right? When you talk about data and everything else, that's where in second or third layer where the data actually sits in there. And then the layer one is really application using that data. So that's where cloud computing comes in. And this is giving you that high level introduction. And I appreciate that is not quite a lot, but I thought sometimes it's important to know, because you do hear these terms, SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, what are these, right? So it's software as a service, process platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. These are for different things for different reasons. In your organization, people within your organization, digital or your IT department, going to be focusing on all three layers. But if you're not an IT department or somewhere else within your organization, you're probably talking about the top one. But you have to think about, as you're thinking about transformation in your within your organization, you need to think about these things as well. And again, depending on your role and your what is it that you're trying to solve. But if I am in a small charity looking to focus on something, I don't have a digital team or everything else, then bare minimum I need is to be able to know what services are available on cloud, so that I can easily, so sometimes like Office 365, Google Suite, all of those things which I can, CRM, someone said in the past as well. So that's basically the tooling platform. Now, taking a little bit, few steps.
Chief, just before we move on quickly, there was a question from Chuck's in the chat box, just saying we're considering moving to a virtual server to reduce our costs. Is that feasible?
Okay, that's a very specific question. Now, your question is whether it's feasible or not. Yes, it's feasible. Again, it depends on your goal. So if you're thinking about moving to the virtual host, I mean, you get the benefits as well. You get a lot of benefit of moving that because you don't have to maintain your physical server. So obviously, then your organization agility increases because you're not tied up into one, I feel like, data centers and everything else, right? So that's basically you paying a service maybe, and you're doing it on demand as well. So your virtual server could be, and there are different options, right? If you're going with the cloud, depending on which cloud you go, on demand, you can get pretty quickly, pretty easily. You scale up, you can scale down. So yeah, you can manage, depending on your needs, you can manage your cost. But you have to be very, you have to thought, again, I'm being careful because I don't want to say the answer is yes, you go, but I think the short answer is yes. Comparing to maintaining your physical servers to the virtual, yeah, from a management perspective, would. Cost-wise, yeah, it could, yes, relatively, but again, it depends on the demand as well. What is it that if you're a small charity or a small organization and you're not compute heavy, then probably the right choice. Again, that would be my view.
Thanks, Satif.
Thanks, Alex, for bringing that question. So I guess we talked about basic, but I wanted to share this this slide with you because I thought this was good. I found this good because of the presentation that when I did my transformation studies as part of my MBA, a couple of these slides actually I took it from there because I learned quite a lot from that. So the big six digital technologies that are out there, and you would hear about them. So I thought it would be good to at least touch upon them. Cloud and virtualization, and I think the question was pretty spot on and on time. We touched upon the virtualization a little bit in my previous answer or in the question that came. And I mentioned about cloud as well. It's just really moving outside, like not necessarily maintaining the things, but leveraging the services. So using the other word is ready-made, if you like, services that are out there. Big data and data analytics, that's a lot out there. You probably, most of you maybe know more than I do. But that's all about how you collect, retain, manage, and use your data for various reasons, right? Especially where we are in our region, data governance is one of the key things and key concerns. So I think for the last few years, this concept of big data and managing a data is actually now, I like to think has been settled in, so everyone knows about this. But now the next question is, you're collecting all this data, now you're doing all the perhaps ethical aspect of it, but more about, okay, the how do I do the value out of it, right? How do I create value out of it for your own organization, still being ethical, moral about what data you're collecting. And growing and managing the data, because that data is going to continue to come. Once you have that way of collecting it, it's going to grow. One thing is for sure, that's a fact. Data will grow. So it's all about managing that data and how you use that data. Analytics is about how you use that data to make it more valuable for your own organization. Internet of Things is something that's been talked about heavily. It's a big hype. Again, we don't need to talk about it, but it will come into, again, it will apply to all sectors and as well, including charities as well. It's all about how our day-to-day life is going to be connected, and all in our information is going to be digitalized, basically, and make use of to achieve something. So something to keep an eye on that, and I'm definitely, I think you will have your path cross on this one in future sometime.
Chief, just whilst we're on that point, there's a question in the chat box. Does the integration of software include communication between technologies referred to as Internet of Things? That's from Jawad.
Yeah, so Jawad, that's a I think to some aspect, yes, but I wouldn't necessarily limit that. Again, that's my personal perspective and the way I see that. It is about different software communicating to each other, but it's not necessarily just about that. It is, what is that software doing? What is that particular software is collecting? What information is collecting? Sometimes it could be like, think about Internet of Things of, okay, let me try to explain to the way I visualize it for myself. At my home, I have a lot of information and data is generating, right? For example, the electricity that I've used, how much do I use, what time I do. I mean, that information is already being collected, by the way. The peak hours and not, and during summer, which seasons I do or not. That's just one information and data. The second is what's my food consumption is. What sort of and when do I do that, and meaning what sort of how often do I go to supermarket and get that, and how that data is going to get collected. It's just talking about collecting that, so thinking about that. So what's in your, I mean, people have to throw a joke, the Internet of Things is not about what food you have in your fridge. I think it is about that as well. So meaning, think about the devices that people, some industries are thinking about, is that they can automatically detect at some point what is in your fridge and what needs to be ordered, and automatically get ordered. So you don't need to, right? And then how I commute as well. Like, right now, it's all reactive to it. I have to go and search when my train is going to arrive, or what time should I take a train, and things like that, because it depends on the actions that I'm doing. And those actions are based on, that data is with me in my head and my behavior. When I'm starting to rely on the technologies or software, that data is now available, at least my behavior is available in a digital form. And then different devices can predict and do and suggest necessary actions. So taking ripping apart your answer or your question, but I'm just saying, yes, it is in a primitive level, it's basically about software talking to software, but it's about data that's being collected and how it's used, and I can go and available everywhere. So that's kind of how my perception of it. But that's what Internet of Things is. Different things are talking to, they are able to talk. So I've used various things. I used about example as your consumption of energy, your food, my travel and things like that. They're all now connected, so they can create a digital, not necessarily footprint. The footprint comes in a negative way, but it's not about traceability. It's more about the behavior and thinking about how can it make it, how can that information be more valuable to me as an individual to facilitate or to improve my living, if you like.
Thanks, Sati.
Then moving on to the next few, so AI, which is artificial intelligence, again, touch based on what I've just said. Once you collect data, one way is you basically look at the data analytics. It's just telling you what the data is, and you basically, from sea of data, you're making sense in a summarized way. But AI really takes it to the next level. Machine learning and AI takes it. Machine learning basically say, okay, I can use the data, and I can. Machine learning is not new. It's been there for years. There are a lot of stories I'm not going to repeat, but they're always there, right? But now what has happened, the compute ability to process large data, to store the large data, and then make sense of it in a relatively short amount of time, is not what the technology can do. Hence, these machine learning models are now the reason we are talking in every single conversation, on every other conversation, AI and all that. But it was academically, this concept is not new, and it has been not even academically, industrial. I mean, people have been using it even in the World War. We hear all the story. Been using Alan Turing and everyone. They've used machine learning for many years ago. So, but now it's everyday transact, right? Machine learning, something behind there. There's a machine learning to using the data, predict what you can do that. And AI is a little bit more. AI is not about just using the data and predict. It's really making those behavioral decisions, basically, which is different to machine learning, but it kind of it bases on the machine learning. But AI is a bit more than that. But again, it requires data as well. 5G and future communication, these are all how the technology is going to take a heaps in terms of making faster. Again, if the technology is slow, people are not going to use it. So that's hence that stack has to go, that has to transform as well. So digital transformation is happening within the digital industry. So these are just the examples. Blockchain and DLT as well. Blockchain there's been a hype for the last few years as well. Distributed ledger technology, especially within the social sector, and also in the government sector. There's quite a lot about how do we basically decentralize the information. It's a quite an interesting aspect. Again, I don't know how relevant it would be, but you may find in your organization a use case or something, an idea which would be more relevant to blockchain. But again, in this session, I'm not necessarily going into more detail on each of those topics, but rather just making a passing comment. So I think we have 15 minutes. I'm going to try to wrap at least my side of things, and then allow people to ask questions. So in summary, we covered quite a lot, but in summary, it all boils down to, again, those three things. I'm just going to repeat that. It's all about integration of information, people, and processes. In your transformation, if the one thing that I would really like you to take away, or the only thing if you could take away, is really think about these three things, right? Which is integration of your information process. In your organization or in your workspace, and where you think about those things. When you think about transformation, you think about what information, what's the data, what's the process it is, and then what are the tools that I'm currently using, and how I can change them. How can I make the integration better between those three things? And if you can do that, that's basically the magic. And then you do it in a smaller scale, and you scale up. Your stakeholder, sorry, again, the typo there, but the engagement of people. You need to bring people. Collaboration is very important, from your board of trustees to the management, or down upward from and to people, employee volunteers, and then your people in your organization, management, and the board of trustees. These has to be bi-directional, right? And each one of those people will play a part. So you have to think about that as well, and you have to keep the communication channel open. Otherwise, it won't happen. It would not. It would not be as successful. Maybe you can have a successful transformation, but maybe not as effective as you would like it to be. Because the one thing you do face, and one thing I even face, is that resistance when it comes to that. So that's where digital transformation, without having that collaboration and transparency, are not an easy path. Culture culture is a mindset change, thinking about it, and that takes time. One positive thing from COVID is really people mindset has changed about moving into more digital. So now is the time to capitalize on that within your organization. Start small and then scale. And agile, repeat, iterate, just do that rather than going big. You can think, agile doesn't mean that you don't think about big picture or you don't think about a plan. No. You do need to think about big picture. You do need to think about the goals that you're doing that. But it's all about, as we're saying, that's how you do it and how you deliver it. And how you do it and deliver is through agile. And leverage what's out there. You as part of your research, you need to think about what sort of tools that I can leverage. And doing that research and study is important. Cloud, we talked about open source. Again, I didn't use this. This is the first time I'm using this term over here throughout the presentation. It's really basically means potentially free software. I use the word potential here. You have to look at the licensing agreement on that. But that means that you don't have to pay for it, but they are available. But there are constraints and some legality that you have to go through that. But you could. And there are a lot of options. And both these options are available on cloud as well. Some applications which are open source, i.e. meaning you might not have, they're free for a reason because people are doing that and they've been funded through a different forum, but you don't get charged, but you are using it. And based on that, under the argument, they might have how you're using it. That's one way. The other is that what I was about to say. I think that's all. So it's about, sorry. So the point I was trying to make that the level of, but they changed the product and application, the way they see it or the way they get the feedback and that may not necessarily be as fast and accurate. I mean, there are pros and cons. So if you're able to pay, then that means your service level is slightly different from the provider. But if you're using open source, you're basically relying on them, on their own goodwill when they feel like they can change or if particular things that you want to improve in the software. So, but that's really not happened. But I think there are some amazing examples of open source that are successful so you don't have to pay. There are a lot of free options there. So I think, I don't know, I still have 10 minutes. So I was thinking about going through this case study with you all. How about we give 5 minutes to this, and then or Alex, what do you think? Should we switch to question and answers or?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe if people wanted to jump in and ask any questions about their own sort of stuff that's going on, or any reflections on what you've said and how, that links back to some of the problems at the beginning. Would people want to spend the last 10 minutes doing that?
Let me just share let's switch my video.
If you've got questions.
I think we have one.
Nafu, you got your hand up? Just shout out.
Yeah, thank you. And can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I remember my funny video I saw that, when people go back to office, when they start a meeting, they still ask the same question. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you so much for the presentation, and it's really, I love the pace. I love the content. I also think that is really make people think it's suitable for all the contexts, because you do not just say this high tech or some other specific context. So I'm working in University Trinity College Dublin. Basically, I think the question for me is that there's so many people using digital transformation. But I think you also have your own definition about digital transformation. For me, I'm just thinking, is it digital transformation just automation? Because you want to use some technology to automate some work, or should it that would be kind of similar to the concept e-commerce. That's e-commerce in the last decade. So I wonder that does digital transformation not just automation, but also has some digital element, for example, some intelligence, some kind of not just you used to do this way, but now let's change another way. For in this case, I think there's kind of a very conceptual, not clarity there, and then cause confusion. IT people and management people, they all have different opinions. So I suppose my question is that how do you define digital transformation?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. It is an interesting one. And I think I tried to, in the beginning of the slide, I tried to touch base a little bit on that. Hence, I've shared few definitions. I think you're right in saying that it's very easy. It's not necessarily a misconception, because it's a fact that the automation is one element of digital transformation. Of course, when you talk about digitalization, how do you take some information and convert into digital world? You kind of need an automation. So you have to go through that. So I would see automation is not necessarily the full thing of digital. It's one aspect of digital transformation. So in the journey of the digital transformation, you have to go through the automation as a process. But the key thing really is the transformation we talked about is the change. What's the process? What's the operational process? What's the goal that you're trying to achieve? What is the value that you're trying to create? And if that value that you're trying to create, I mean, you can create that value through a process which is completely manual. That's absolutely fine, because you solved a problem, right? But then immediately next thing you're talking about that, oh, is it better than how it was, right? But then it comes down to value as well. That you talk about, okay, you can increase a service to something, whatever within your organization, but then it may not be cost effective. So when it's not cost effective, then you come to the aspect of your operational processes. When you look at the operational processes, you think about, okay, how can I improve that? I give you a simple example. You can hire 4 people to do the same thing, or you can hire 2 people who know how to do this. Right. Again, that's a process. You're thinking of transformation over here. With the digital transformation, it's not about how many people I can think about. You think about overall net goal that you will achieve, right? And you're thinking about not current in time, you're also thinking about future as well. And that's where digital transformation allows you. You're constantly thinking about not today, not tomorrow, but the day after and after. But that's where it helps. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think that's how I think about it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Satif. Jawad's just put the hand up. Do you want to go next?
Hi, my question was kind of further to the automation point. So I was curious, when I was studying this sort of thing, I found that the digitalization and the automation processes are quite disruptive. But in the sense that in the same way we had bank tellers quite a while ago who would give you cash, then ATMs came along and their job changed to be more of a customer support system. I was wondering, within the charity sector specifically, how you'd see these disruptions affect day-to-day work, who would be hired, who would we end up firing to replace with, a completely different job description, probably.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jiva, for the question. It's an interesting question, and I do see I don't know the right word, but among friends, I say whether there is a moral dilemma about this as well, right? You talk about specifically about people being laid off or removed or replaced through the automation. I mean, there is an element of that, and that element is not new, because we might be living in a digital world now. So we're going through this, what we call a digital wave. If you rewind, I mean, maybe in our generation, maybe not, but if you go back, I don't know, 40 years, there was another revolution many years ago, industrial revolution, and that same thing happened, right? People used to do things and the machines came, and then you have industries that they replaced them and then moved into service sector, and now service sector is going through the digitalization. So that kind of revolution happens every 40, 50 years, right? If my history and study of history is correct, and maybe someone on the group could actually correct me on that. But that kind of transformation happens. I mean, this is nothing new. What we are going through is that the question you're asking, okay, automation is within our own within our world and in our workspace is taking over, and someone else could have was able to do that job, but now there's a system doing this. In some aspect, that's bad. That's kind of a negative connotation to it. But the other aspect is actually no, that's okay. And I'll think about COVID, right? Again, I'm going to use that again. It's a cliche now to use that example. Within charity, there's a lot of funding, fund collection used to happen. People used to go and put boxes into the shops, or volunteers will be on the streets trying to collect money and things like that. And then what happened? Like, no touch. You cannot touch. So suddenly, from that perspective, we went into contactless, and look how much it has helped. It has helped the charity. Imagine in 2 years, those organizations that completely rely on funding, and I'm not talking about big funding, I'm talking about literally penny or pound or something, right? And able to leverage technology to be able to collect those funding through connection, contactless options that are out there, has really helped them, right? I can understand that when we go forward, basically all the people used to come and volunteer and collect that may not necessarily not be required, but there will be something else that they need to do. So I think just like how the business is transforming, this is my personal view, by the way, there will be an impact to the individual, and obviously it's inevitable. But we ourselves will transform to something else. We'll figure out what is it as a human that I can play part of it, right? So it's about figuring out where do I fit in that process, and what sort of value that I provide and create. So that's how I see it, and that's how I kind of explain to myself that yes, there is an impact to the individual, and yes, it would be, but it's not as simple as someone's job will be taken care of because something else will come in. But no, maybe it will be, because it may be an impact to quite a lot of people. But look how it is helping in the other aspect, and then people who are affected because their job was to do this would probably transform. That's an opportunity for them to basically think about what else I can do. And it's a tough one. It's not easy, and I'm not saying I have the answer. But I think that's the mindset. That's where the culture we talked about. Like again, the culture and the mindset shift is not just about organization in terms of automation. It's about people, and that's why I kept saying throughout my presentation, it involves people, process, people, impacting, like the moral dilemma, the ethical dilemma of transformation. You cannot take that away when you talk about transformation.
Thanks, Satif. That brings us to 2 o'clock. So I don't know if you've got time for maybe one more.
I can take one more. I can take
question, one if anybody's got one from the audience. Chucks?
Hi. I can't get my camera on. Oh, it is on, actually.
Oh.
Yeah, just to say that, yeah, thanks for the presentation. I found it very, very useful. Yeah, to what extent, there's like 2 questions really. Do our clients and users have to invest in technology to help this process? I think, is that part of it? And then the other thing is that, have we, through this pandemic, not kind of moved forward inevitably towards digital transformation because we're doing a lot more things online? Is that part of it, or is that a separate process?
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. So I think it's a very interesting question, yes. So like a 2-part question. So if I could just start with your first part, which is how, if I understood your question correctly, like what role, I'm maybe paraphrasing your question, the customer or client play in the digital transformation. I mean, they play quite a fundamental role, right? At the end of the day, whatever change that you're trying to bring in, and again, you have to think about in your definition, again, I'm going to go a little bit broad, which is about when you say client. For me, sometimes I work in an organization which is quite big, and sometimes when I'm working on some transformational project, my clients and my users are within the organization as well. So you have to always think about, it's not who you're interacting with, right? And for who you're solving that particular problem. So thinking about that, it's quite fundamental. It's they are the so remember in my process we talked about feedback. you can only get the feedback from your clients and from your users, right? So that dialogue, that communication needs to be constant. So I think they play a valuable, so the short answer to your question, they play a valuable role into it. And then you have to, depending on the problem, you have to think about how and when to engage them. So your client and users could be, if your service, like, okay, sometimes it's some of the people that I interact with, they say, okay, my clients or my users are board of trustees. So how do I engage with them, right, in this process? So that's more about strategy. So you're thinking about more how I'm going to take the strategy, how I'm going to deliver the strategy, what the plan is. So you have to have that engagement model as well, and cannot be at one step that you're going to do someone from the top said, go digital, and they forget about it, and you do your digital thing. But there is no feedback from bottom to up. So that has to happen. Same goes from the outside client as well. You have to bring the client, and the way to do this, I'm going to use my analogy on my industry. Surveys. We do quite a lot of surveys to get that, what is it that people are looking for and how they're looking for, and do that. We have our own observation, but we validate those observations through some feedback. And once you do that, then that becomes a fact. It's no longer an assumption. And then you're working on a fact. And when you go with them and you say, hey, look at this is what I've done, then you're addressing a fact, not an assumption. And that's why you get the feedback. They can connect, they can emotionally connect to that. But an assumption is just the perception of one person. That's where tensions establish, when you're based on the assumption. And so I work in a people-based organization. I have to deal quite a lot on that. So I think that's where the thing comes in, right? My advice is always use facts to connect with your users or clients. Then the other question about that, whether the COVID going into everything and internet is inevitable or not. I think that has accelerated the pace. And but we would have, I think if COVID hadn't happened 5 years after, or maybe give it 5 years, maybe less, you'd be talking about exactly the same thing. If you think about the progression of things going online, yeah, it was limited to not even service industry, but more about retail. Retail was the key thing moving, right? Online ordering and everything else. And even before COVID, we used to hear good news, right? The shops are getting closed. The high street whether high street is going to exist or not exist. All the fun things were there. And the restaurants basically said, we will always be there. No, we will never be closed. People need to get it up. But look what happened. The restaurant industry has changed. Initially, the big restaurant basically said, nah, we're service-based. People need to come in. It's the experience that we give. And they changed the whole thing. They say, yes, we give the experience, but the product is our food. People really like food, and we want to do that. So look how kitchen becomes a service provider. And we basically said, we'll open up our kitchen to provide. And that's what happened. And some of the restaurants, which I've seen, is taken a long time to get to that point. So yes, internet is enabler to make it easy, because everything is there. Because doing a digitalization, it's easy because all information is there, and access everywhere, anywhere. That has made significantly easier to do that, as opposed to doing it maybe 7 years or 10 years ago. And cloud has actually, again, has helped tremendously in that space.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you so much, Atif. I think we'll probably have to draw it to an end now. We've gone 5 minutes over, and I'm sure you're a busy man, so don't want to take any more of your time. But thank you so much for the presentation. It was incredibly interesting, and I hope that that's demystified some of the concepts around digital transformation for you. If people have more questions, then do just drop me an email. I think you should have that anyway, but I'll pop it in the chat. We'll be sharing I've been typing some notes, so I'll be sharing the notes and the slides and a few resources that you can have a look at as well afterwards, so keep an eye out for that. And yeah, just once again, Atif, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Alex, and thanks for organizing this. I had a pleasure talking about some of the things that I know, and I'm humbled that I'm able to share that, and I'm also having to get the opportunity to get some questions. I've just popped in my LinkedIn there, so in case people have any questions and they want to connect, feel free to. I'm a little bit active in LinkedIn than any other platform. So I'm a bit of a classic person, but I don't use Facebook. So when this thing happened yesterday, what was going on? I didn't even know WhatsApp and Facebook were not working. So it was my wife was telling me that it was down. But anyway, but thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, and everybody have a lovely evening. Take care.
Take care.
Bye then.
Bye.